for biographies and nonfiction works that I'm gravitating towards more, which up until within the last 5 years, I just avoided those like the plague. I could not stand reading that sort of stuff. And now it's like
small places.
Now that Nina enjoys biographies.
Yeah.
I love biographies. Well, I love autobiographies. I don't read as many biographies.
Yeah.
I think Keith Green's I remember reading. Which
Keith Green is biography.
has anyone read his story?
She's reading biographies.
No, she's only like the reason we have Christian worship music.
I was gonna say, yeah.
He's amazing.
Saxophonist, musician.
No,
Kenny
so
Loggins?
So Keith Green,
Kenny G?
he,
That's what I was thinking.
you know, there you are.
Merry Christmas!
Oh, thank
I got
you.
you this.
Look at that.
You know, Oh Lord, you're beautiful. Oh Lord, you're beautiful. That's Keith Green.
She played this game with me, and I didn't know a lot of them.
Gosh, you know who he is. He had a huge fro, and he was killed in a plane crash, I think.
Because of the fro?
Not because of the fro.
Along with 3 of his children or 4 of his children.
A bunch of people in a plane, yeah. His wife survived them. A bunch of artists have done it was awesome at Lauren Daigle's concert. She's like, yeah, I was laying down one day during all the lockdown stuff, and these words came to me, and I was like, oh my gosh, those are amazing words. She's like, did I write those words? And then she looks up, she's like, nope, I didn't write these. And it was Keith Green. It was Oh Lord, You're Beautiful. And she sang it. And I was like, so good. Like, that's like, yeah. Am I opening this?
Yeah, open it.
Open it now?
Yeah, why not? I'm not gonna be at the Christmas party, so
Oh.
and it's also just a thanks for gonna be at that. You know,
Wesley, is this like,
there's one for each of you.
do we know, does it matter? Do I get to choose which one I like
You
the
get
best?
to choose. Yeah, you get to choose.
I can already tell what it is.
I know exactly. This
Yeah.
is a. Is it a Caitlin original
Yep.
or is it a?
Yeah, Caitlin original. Wow.
I know you gotta do your coffee every morning.
We do, and I love. Oh, I know which one I want.
Okay, one's dark, one's light.
I want whatever one you want.
I was gonna say she should choose first.
And then you just take it.
Choose
And then you should-
wisely.
One looks a little more manly, but the manly one's smaller, I think, so it's kind of tricky.
These are beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
You know I wanted one.
Is some handcrafted ceramics and is it pottery or ceramics?
Yeah, both. Either one. They're ceramic, they're dishwasher safe and everything.
I love them
Wash
both.
them.
I will keep them both.
I was
Dishwasher
gonna say,
safe, isn't that a name of a band or something?
It's gotta be.
Dishwasher safe.
Is dishwasher safe?
Jars of
People always
clay.
ask me. I feel like people know that, but I guess because it's handmade, people are like, "Can I?" I'm like, "Yeah, you can throw some of those things." in the
Have you
small.
chosen?
Yeah, they'll be fine.
Even some of the ones you get at the store. Or something
Well,
like
that's
that.
why, because these are fired actually at like a way higher temperature than the ones at the store. So the ones at the store are a lot more fragile than
I
homemade
like the
ones.
inside
Yeah, it's
of
neat.
that one.
So yeah, if you actually get handmade pottery, that's how a lot of people, well, rich people will buy like their whole sets, Dutch ovens and everything that's handmade, because handmade pottery is fired at a way higher temperature, so it's way more durable than like stuff you buy at the store. So,
See, here's the thing: is I know which one he wants.
do you want that one as well?
I like them both.
You just trade off.
So
It doesn't matter. We
trade off anyway.
Yeah.
I usually claim if I claim one at my house, I'm like, this is my mug.
I like the mugs that
He likes
that
the
taper at the
plunges
top.
in.
That way it actually keeps
the heat in.
keeps the
we call,
heat in.
Yeah, we call them cauldron mugs.
Yes.
I make those too. I make more cauldrons. So
Because I have
the
one
heat
from
in.
Norway, and it is the
The
best
wide bottom.
mug. It's wide bottom, and it's really small at the top, and the coffee stays
I was
hot
gonna say,
for
you'll
so
notice
long.
too, handmade pottery too, since it's fired at a higher temperature, it keeps heat way better than regular mugs do.
Okay, we'll have to try
so
it out in the
you notice
morning.
the difference, because I notice the difference with mine or my friend's pottery compared to stuff I buy at the
Well,
store.
these are both. I love them so. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
That's amazing.
I think those would be something they use at least.
Oh,
So.
100%. We will. This will tomorrow morning will be used because
Yes.
Did you bring back the whiskey?
Yeah. If anybody wants
Around
everybody wants to try it. We have black cherry and blackberry bird dog
smell
whiskey.
Everybody needs to at least smell it. It smells really.
Were you here last time?
He wasn't. That's why he needs. You need to let
Okay.
him here.
Oh, it's so gross.
Drink of it.
Here, so I'll tell you the quick backstory since you weren't here. You know the organization I grew up in.
You told me about this.
Okay, I did. I told you. Good.
Okay. Well, there it is.
There it is.
Now that's the small bottles. It came with a big bottle of peach, like if you want it, you can have it. I'm looking to share to give it away.
Yeah, he's looking to give it.
Which one don't you want?
Your
one.
dealer's choice.
I think you need to drink it tonight.
Jody,
Okay.
if you want to know backstory, 10 seconds. He grew up United Pentecostal church.
Teetotalers.
Teetotalers. And with his dad and stepmom. Stepmom gave him that for Christmas. And we don't even
Bought
know
me
what's going on.
whiskey for me for
I said,
Christmas,
she
and I was
died.
like,
I said, is she
"How
dying?
in the world did she?" It's like, what? Okay, that's fan.
I'm like, here's the last gift. I know it's what you like, and I don't agree with you. I'm like, what is going on?
The world is
Maybe
changing.
it was punishment.
And maybe
Or it is punishment. It's like more Captain Holt punishment. I know you hate.
it's so bad that it's punishment.
You guys, I'm so close to finishing this book, but I haven't finished. I'm like so close. I think I have like 2 chapters left. I didn't have time before I got here. And I'm
I
like
did.
thumped.
Okay.
So
I think you're
close.
better along than most of us.
Yeah.
Okay, really? Okay, good. So we maybe won't finish.
Where are you, Miriam?
I finished it.
Okay, she's good.
I
I just
finished.
started
Well-
on Hoopla for him though yesterday, so he hasn't even really started.
Okay.
Have you started listening to it?
All right, so
They haven't started the battle. It's like they literally just said at the end of this chapter, like, it's time to go. Like, we're about to start this thing. So,
it's go time.
it's
All right.
go time.
So then, what are your impressions? So let's just, if you could pick, let's pick some spots out. You're like, okay, this was impactful. What were some of the things that were very impactful as you're reading this? It could be something, because I know Caitlin, you had something you want to talk about.
Let me pull it.
But you notice Lewis, again, if you pull a thread in Weight of Glory's inner circle, it will pucker pages in that hideous strength. So Mark,
Like,
yes.
dude, you gotta get over this.
What
Right.
I loved is how the NICE wanted to open that chamber under Bragdon Wood, wanted to find Merlin so bad, and they blew it.
They were
It was so
embarrassing.
once I realized what was going on.
Right.
He was good. He was good at writing that though. Like
Yeah, you didn't
you're
know.
like
He was showing the cards without showing the cards, and everything was open.
you kind of
Like
get it.
he
You know what's
mentioned
going on.
Merlin in the beginning. All this stuff was mentioned, and then yet you're shocked. Like, no, this is not this. I mean, because
Oh, talking about her dream, like when you mentioned it.
well, I'm just saying in the beginning. So even like
He
a
mentioned Merlin in the very beginning.
Conan Doyle always gives you the information, but he doesn't give it to you in a chronological, systematic form. But you have all the information that Sherlock has. Can you order it correctly to come to the correct conclusion? Lewis is the same thing here. He gives it all, but so it's a British guy talking about Merlin. Yeah, of course, it's King Arthur. And they're going to be talking about that. It's just part of culture.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so. Cannon fired early on with this, and you never expected it. And I think that's brilliant. Lewis did a brilliant thing there.
Everyone figure out Featherstone.
I
Yeah.
finally got that. It's like,
But
I listened to
listen,
you two today and was like, what?
okay, let's just figure out where we went wrong here though. Because
Oh yeah. So
Did he give us that hint way sooner?
Yes.
oh my gosh, page 13.
Let me just read it.
Okay.
And I'm sorry for the
Oh,
spoilers.
that's okay. I'm just here to listen.
I haven't
But
finished
you
it,
should
so.
please read it.
Oh, I will.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
But yes, there will be spoilers today. Let's see. So we have chapter 1, part 2, where it starts with Mark himself, but it goes further down to the next page. And, good Lord Telford, said Curry with a laugh. No, I mean Lord Featherstone, Dick Devine as he used to be. What's wrong with us?
I don't know how you guys didn't
I know.
get
got
that,
that.
but that's
I heard it in the tiny little Passover sentence.
At
It was
the
like-
end.
Yeah, when he was like, oh yeah, ransom was like, oh yeah, that's who that is. And I was like, wait. What?
I'm like, how did I miss that?
What? Was this a... I don't know why my brain didn't read that.
And Miriam, not you?
Did you know that? Did you
I
know
don't
that?
remember if I saw it there or in that later passage.
Well, the later passage is the end.
That's when I freaked out.
But
I'm
yeah,
like,
I remember seeing it at some point. I don't know. I don't remember reading it at the very beginning,
Yeah.
but I had to go
This
back
is
several
the
times, so I may have
do you know
seen
why?
that
Maybe
sentence
I saw that
later.
it might have been because
Well,
he
Mr.
said Dick
Simon-
Divine, and it, like it just I just remember Divine because when he says it the second time, he doesn't say his first name, and I know that's his first name, but I think maybe it just because they call him Divine, don't they? The whole first.
Yeah,
book,
I don't
mostly. They
remember.
call
I don't
him
remember
Ron.
a Dick.
Yeah, it
Divine.
wasn't
So I think
Dick.
that's why maybe my brain just skimmed over it.
yeah, Dick Divine. You're like, oh yeah, that's not the
Yeah,
same
and then when
guy.
he said formerly known as Divine, or whatever he says later on in the book, I was like,
But we talked about his murder, right?
What?
We
Yes.
talked about him being murdered.
Yeah.
The way they set that up too was almost like something else going.
Talking about Weston?
Yeah.
Yeah, talked about the Weston thing.
Yeah.
All right, so what? So
but it's funny because I liked him. I think I don't know if I told you that the first group. I was like, for a villain. I mean, I don't like
Yeah.
him, but he was my favorite.
he
Villain.
was my favorite villain in the story.
And out of the Silent Planet,
He's the
he was.
amiable villain.
And I liked it. He's just upfront. He just tells you, shoots you straight about things.
He didn't hide anything.
No,
and
he
I
said-
love that about him.
But
He's
he's
just
not playing on any team. He's playing on his own team.
Yes, and I was like, I prefer that than someone you can't trust, that you don't know where you stand with them. At least you know where you stand with this guy. And so
Yeah.
then this time, my favorite villain was Featherstone, and I was like, it all makes sense because they're the same person.
there you
So-
go.
So have you gotten? Wait.
I mean, I haven't
There's
finished
that one
it.
part. I can't remember now where it is. But it's somebody in the NICE, or several of them, were all basically for themselves and didn't believe anything except for what they had taught themselves to believe. And it reminded me so much of the dwarves in the last battle. The
Ooh.
dwarves for the dwarves.
Dwarves are for the dwarves,
They
yes.
totally shut out anything pertaining to truth and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. They wanted to believe what they wanted to believe, and they missed everything. Because
Well, the language of the NICE is that everything's ambiguous and everything's fluid. So anything can mean whatever it needs to mean in the moment.
Withers embodies in this.
Wither embodies this fluidity of language of going, well, yes, this word can mean this in this moment, but if I need it to mean this, it can mean this over here. What other conclusion are you going to come to other than words can mean what I want them to mean, so the dwarves are for the dwarves. Like, I'm going to use language to my advantage. Wither's using it for his advantage, I'm going to use it for my advantage. And so that's what the Green Book and Unabashedly Resolute is all about. If you teach kids that their emotional opinion about a subject, that they get to impose their eisegetical feelings onto a text, then you're going to have that. That's what you're going to.
Abolition of man.
That's abolition of man. That's the whole point of this, is abolition of, you have the lower language trying to make the lower higher by simply lowering the language down, which I think I mentioned this last time, but the heads look bigger. And at Abolition of Man, he says that these men look like they have great brains, but actually their heads are the same size as everyone else's, but their chest has atrophied because they don't have a heart. They don't have imagination and reason. And so what Wither is doing is he's taking the lower language and he's making it even lower so you can't understand it, to make the lower language look higher than it is. On St. Anne's side, you actually have the higher language that can't be attained to because it's the Eldil language. It's from Eldil himself, and it can't be attained to. And we're trying to understand it in our lower sense. I think a great example of this, has anyone gotten to the point where Paralandra and then comes down into St. Anne's? There's a great part that this right here, I think this embodies what we talk about, the transpositional thing that so much. Long before anything happened in the Blue Room, the party in the kitchen was made up of their 10 o'clock tea. It was while they sat drinking it that the change occurred. Up until now, they'd instinctively been talking about in subdued voices as children talk in a room where the elders are busied in some august incomprehensible matter. A funeral, a reading of a will. Now, of the sudden, they began talking loudly at once, each not contentiously, but delightfully interrupting the other. A stranger coming into a kitchen would have thought they were drunk. Not soddenly, but gaily drunk, and would have seen heads bent so close together, eyes dancing, excited with the wealth of gestures, when they said none of the party could ever afterwards remember. Demo maintained that they had been making puns, but McPhee denied that he ever, even that night, had ever made a pun. But all agreed they had been extraordinarily witty, if not a play upon words, yet a play upon ideas, paradoxes, fancies, anecdotes, theories laughingly advanced on consideration, even well worth taking seriously, had flowed from them over and with dazzling prodigality. Even Ivy forgot her great sorrow. Mother Deborah always remembered Dennis and her husband as they stood, one on each side of the fireplace, in a gay intellectual duel, each capping the other, each rising above the other, up and up and up like birds or aeroplanes in combat, if only one could have remembered what was said. I think that is the best version we can get of the lower reaching the highest point to the higher that we can get in the transpositional language of this just up. I mean, it was just, I can understand, I can grab everything that you're grabbing, and we're just going. So we're taking language and understanding to that high level. And that's what happens when you actually are imbued and embodied in the environment atmosphere of the higher language. You are brought up. We are brought up into that. Where in Bellbury, they have the lower language and they make it obscure to make it seem like it's higher, and they devolve into chaos.
You haven't gotten to the banquet at Bellbury, have you?
I don't think so.
Oh.
It is. If you want to, I can't divulge that part.
Okay.
Every time we would go, you know, it goes back from like Jane's perspective of what's happening in her world to what's happening in Mark's world. Every time we would go back to Mark, I was like, can I just skip this? Like, this is like, the way they talk is annoying. The way that they act is annoying.
The banquet at Bellbury is going to be
glorious.
I cannot even imagine this on film because it would be
glorious.
A horror.
Glorious.
Horror film.
I think that's why, you know, people say it's hard to get through. I think it's hard to get through. I will say I do, but not Jane's part. Like reading about her and St. Anne's, like all that is exciting. But when I read like when it goes back to Mark's part and you're like listening to those conversations, I'm like, this is what drags on. And I know it's important for the story, but it's just like this just shows that without even saying it, you know, word for word or verbatim, like here's why you want to be on this team. They just show you just by like the spiritual. You can feel the spiritual atmosphere when you're at St. Anne's, and you can't feel that atmosphere when you're reading about Mark's experience.
Are you familiar with the Joycean literary style? Mm-mm. James Joyce, considered one of the great writers of all literature, wrote Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake and all those. In Dubliners, he is one of the first things he really did. He was known for, and he created the style of writing wherein when he would write a scene, every word, every adjective would be the connotation of the atmosphere of the scene. So if it was a boring scene, he would use boring sentence structures in every possible boring word that he could read. So when you were at the end of the sentence, you were so bored with it, you didn't want to continue reading it.
Regardless of what the actual
the syntax. So through the syntax, he created atmosphere.
Wow, I feel like that's what happened, because people say his book's hard to get through, and I agree, but it's only because those certain parts that are meant to be that way.
Right. Because when you have language that is so intentionally, tortuously convoluted, how can you expect for it to flow any other way? And so that's why you have this. On the other side, you have this thing where you know there's just truth, and it's sweeping through, and you're caught up into it because it's the higher and it's going. Like in Till We Have Faces, and that Lewis talks about this, but he also talks about it in Weight of Glory, that the gods are having a conversation. They're not looking at you. You're not invited into the conversation, but you get to hear it. And because you get to hear it. And so that's what it's like at St. Anne's. You get to listen into this conversation that the gods are having that you're not even yet ready prepared for. On the other side, it's laborious and it's tortured conversation.
Yeah. I think a big part of it too that we long for that we don't have in this right now, especially at this time, is nobility. And I feel like nobility is when they're talking in St. Anne's, you feel that sense of nobility from everyone, even like the characters who are smaller, not even like what's the creature that he has,
Mr. Multitude.
Yeah, even Mr. Bolton, you feel a sense of nobility from him, and you don't even know who he is, but he looks like nothing. But every character, I feel like Lewis made it
I
seem
love
like they're
Multitude.
noble.
He's so good.
He's so good. I love that name too.
Have you read? I think you've gotten to that part where they explain. I know you've read it. Where they go through Mr. Multitude's like feelings and his lack of awareness or awareness of who he is.
I think I've gotten that far.
Like I just thought that was so. It was so fascinating how Lewis wrote that. Like he didn't know why he felt the thing that he felt, but he knew that he wanted it, but he didn't know why he wanted it. It was like this because animals don't have that same kind of apparently, unless he's a Narnia there. But,
Prefrontal cortex.
Yeah,
The frontal lobe.
He wants to go over the edge, but where's Ivy? Ivy, right?
Yeah.
Ivy's the one that tells him not to do the things, and he misses Ivy. He doesn't understand that he misses her, but he misses her presence or something.
Yeah.
And then he jumps over the ledge, and But
That whole description I thought was wonderful, just to, because with Disney and everything like that, we've anthropomorphized animals and made them where they've got to be thinking and feeling exactly like humans do.
Right.
It was really cool.
And
You could understand how. Yeah, when you watch your
do.
animals do things like that, you're like, that makes sense. He's standing in the yard. Do I want to jump over the fence? I could get in trouble for the jump over the fence. I don't know that it's trouble. I just know that this happens when I do this thing.
Right.
And then if I get over there, oh, but look, there's something tasty over there. And I'm like, this is like an animal thinking. And it was like, of course, Lewis.
Squirrel.
Lewis was obsessed with animals from like child.
Oh, I love that.
So,
Obviously, just
I love that added element to Ransom's story that he brought that back.
he brought some animals in there.
Love that.
That was before Narnia.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Multitude and the mice. I love that Mr. Multitude is like kind of like nuzzling up to Merlin while Merlin's sitting there, and Merlin's just kind of like whatever.
Yeah.
I named my next pet Mr. Multitude.
So let's look at that just for a minute because Miriam brought this in. Who saw Merlin coming? Did anybody see Merlin? You saw Merlin coming. That he was who was buried in the tomb, the Roman road. And,
Yeah, they mentioned it from the very beginning.
but you knew that that's what they wanted. They were going after Merlin.
That was on the back cover of the book.
Well,
I don't remember because I knew it the first time I read it, so I can't tell you
right.
what I.
First time I read it, I did not expect for it to go there because here's the thing: people might think that's far fetched, but Hitler himself also went after the occult things, and he went after the mystical and the druidical.
I've seen Indiana Jones. I know.
And the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and Indiana
No,
Jones.
not that one. Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Raiders of the Lost Ark. So we have this notion, and it's so convoluted from the very first college meeting, and the thing that was set in motion years before the NICE wanted Merlin. Where did that information come from? Why was that a goal of the NICE?
That part I don't remember. But I do remember grasping fairly early on that that's what they were after, was the ancient magic and power and such. And that's why it was such a hoot that they ended up getting some old West Country
A
tramp.
tramp.
The tramp. The tramp is brilliant. Brilliant.
Yes. And yet they thought they had Merlin, and they were revering him and talking.
So
and the tramp was so.
the tramp was pretty clever, but look at the convoluted language there. The tramp, they couldn't tell the difference between a tramp and Merlin because they'd become so convoluted in their thinking and in their fluidity that when it came to nailing something down concrete, they actually couldn't do it. They didn't have the wherewithal to do that. And yet God knew all this, and Jane was having dreams, and she knew that Merlin. So they went searching for Merlin, and Merlin finds them. I just think
Shows up on the doorstep.
shows up on the doorstep. You know, I think that's.
Caitlin, if you thought, well, I mean, it's different. I'm just thinking of Paralandra, where he, crushes the skull, and I'm like,
It's pretty gory.
The
Is this even
scene.
more gory?
Oh, it's more.
Wow. This could be Paralandra, I thought the end could be like a horror film. Like, truly.
Well, wait till you enter into this. It's different. It's a different kind of feeling because it's more chaotic. But it's when I was trying to picture it, because you picture it while you're reading what it looks like, and the whole time I'm reading The Banquet at Bellberry, and I'm like, this, like it's not even yikes, like it's incomprehensible, like how disgusting everything actually is.
Am I sure this is the same guy that wrote Lucy?
Yes.
Am I sure the same guy that wrote Aslan?
I mean, it's fascinating, but you also.
He's got range, Lewis.
He does have
He's got
range. This has nothing to do with anything we're talking about. Can I mention it?
Yeah.
Am I allowed?
We're kind of jumping all over here, so.
I thought of you, Randy, when I saw this part because I have LOTR ? And it says, and the voice too was such as one might imagine to be the voice of a tree, large and slow and patient, drawn up through roots and clay and gravel from the depths of the earth. And I was like,
Treebeard, anybody?
this sounds a little bit like the Ents.
Well, he writes about it in the foreword that he's talking about Numenor and Professor Tolkien's stuff is still working its way out. So I wonder if maybe in the midst of writing this, he
They mentioned Middle Earth a couple times in here,
that. Yep.
which that comes from Beowulf.
Yep.
So there's definitely, this came out before Narnia, but this didn't come out. The Hobbit came out before this, but Lord of the Rings had not yet come out. So I'm sure there's overlap.
He was reading through that stuff.
Yes.
They would have been talking to each other
I was going to
about
say,
it.
probably would have been talking about it.
Yes, they would have been discussing it.
Because didn't Tolkien challenge him to write this? And then...
And then was displeased with the final outcome.
Are you guys with the microbes? Do you know anything about the microbes?
Microbes or macrobes?
Sorry, macrobes. Sorry.
There's a difference.
There is a huge difference. Huge difference. Macrobes. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Frost
Caitlin, you're not.
Microbes.
I'm not going to get this. No, I don't.
Okay.
No, she's...
Well-
you won't...
You've not really been. You probably don't know. Okay.
No, she should because she's
Okay.
just...
Well, I'll just explain it
It's probably just a word you weren't paying attention to.
because I want to show you the difference in because I want to say where I posed the question, where did they get the idea for Merlin, right? Okay, so we know from Paralandra and Malacandra that the bent one reached out and laid his hand on Malacandra. They drove him back and they shut off. The bent one reached his hand out to Malacandra and attacked. The Oyarsa there drove him back, and they confined him to be within the bounds of Thalakandra. He could not leave Thalakandra. He only got past Thalakandra to get to Paralandra through Weston. Right? But the third, the ones who left their former estate were still on Thalakandra. Okay? And they've offered ancient wisdom to people who will listen. Okay? They call themselves the Macrobes, which I think is Lewis's nod back to the Nephilim. When we go into Beowulf, the Nephilim are there at the very beginning because they're getting this ancient wisdom. The voice that comes through the head is the Macrobes. They're the one who are giving all this information because if you listen to what Philostrato says, and I think this is very telling. Oh, yes, replied Philostrato, the pretty trees, the garden trees, but not the savages. I put roses in my gardens, but not the briar. The forest tree is a weed. I will tell you, the civilized tree is in Persia. It was a French attaché who had it because it was a place where a tree did not grow. It was made of metal, a poor crude thing. But if it were perfected, a light when made of aluminum, so natural, it would deceive. And he goes through saying that he would want to make a forest of this. And he actually at the end says that the impure and the organic are the same. He wants an entire forest full of metal trees and metal birds. And you go, isn't it interesting that the enemy wants the intellectual and emotional image of a forest, but
Not the real thing.
but because he can't control the real thing. He doesn't have the power to control the real thing because he doesn't understand it. He lacks the Nephilim when they leave heaven. They're cut off from knowledge. So whatever knowledge they had when they left, that's all the knowledge they have. That's why the aim is off. That's why the aim for Merlin was off, because they don't know how to aim correctly because they're limited in their knowledge. They're always limited in their scope. The enemy always misses and fails because he doesn't know how to aim correctly, because his aim is not at truth. His aim is at power, or his aim is at destruction of human life. And so he will always miss. They miss getting Merlin in the tomb because they didn't know how to aim. So the macrobes are the one informing the NIC that they need to get Merlin. Okay, we have another presence at St. Anne's. We have the Eldils, who are actually informing and talking to Ransom. They are still connected to all knowledge and all wisdom and all truth. Therefore, they have the correct aim if they follow. If they don't pull a Jill and Eustace, and they follow and they just do what they're told, they will actually have the correct aim. And so you see those two things playing out. The forces behind it are the former estates.
Flip side of the same coin, right?
Flip side of the same coin. And one is limited, stunted, constipated knowledge, and the other is higher knowledge connected to truth. And those are the two things you see. One devolves and one goes further up and further in.
And the one going further up and further in has that attraction to anybody who has ever been keyed into it before, like Merlin was.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how come he ended up on.
I think that's very, very good, and that draws him in.
Even Jane too, right? She feels, and she's like reluctant. Like I was thinking, the new film that just came out, like the most reluctant convert. I was like, Jane is the most reluctant hero. Like
she is.
Hero. Like,
yes.
She doesn't want to be, but she feels that pull, and she knows that it's like the right thing.
Must I be Christian?
And she was already connected to the metaphysical poetry of John Donne, so she was already drawn into the metaphysical. So the language of the metaphysical was something that she was attracted. She was doing her PhD on this, and so that drew her. And so the echo of a tune not heard, when you hear it, it's unmistakable. Oh, I know that.
One of my favorite parts of the whole book so far, because I've finished it, but is her meeting Ransom and their conversation, and how she goes into that, and how Lewis describes how she's feeling and how she's acting, what she's thinking, and how that changes from what she prepared herself to talk to him about, and how that all just kind of melted away when she actually met him. I wish I could find what page that's on, because I would love to read that again. It was so good about, and how he responded to her, and it almost was like Lewis was making it seem like it wasn't like Ransom was intimidating, but he was without trying to be. It was almost like whenever he meets the Green Lady in Paramander. It was like a similar experience, but with Jane and with Ransom, the flip side of that.
So if we look at Mark and Jane there, what you're talking about, Ransom's language is hard to wrestle with because it's hard to comprehend, and it's frustrating, and it's overwhelming because it's true, and you have to bring your mind around to accepting truth. Wither's language is hard to understand because it's ambiguous. It's ambiguous and it's convoluted. And Mark doesn't know what to do, not because it's hard, it's because Wither's made it hard.
Yeah.
And so, but he's
saying nothing.
He's saying nothing. One person is speaking truth that's hard to understand because it's truth and it's hard to understand. It's higher than her. And the other one is not speaking anything and it's hard to understand because it's not anything. And you see, it's lower than him, and he's going, wait, I just want a job. Will you give me a paycheck? Well, we don't really do that here. You just have to just go out and do what we have. It's like, this should be easy. Where's my contract? Well, we haven't used anything like a contract in years. There's probably one lying around somewhere that you get you to sign, but we don't really do that sort of thing here. And so you see that convoluting. I want to get to this aim part because I think this is, there's a scripture that, in this language of villains, this idea that I've had, this language of villains, there's always the notion of the halflings running around Mordor, unseen, unsuspected by Sauron. There's always a thing the enemy doesn't count on because the enemy doesn't know, because of the stunted intellectual process, that it doesn't know. And Lewis points this out. And Caitlin, you'll probably get to this. You haven't got to the ante room yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But I just want to read.
Tonight, don't worry.
Okay.
You can have a hard time the last 2 chapters.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna finish it tonight.
So Mark is he's in a room going to be initiated into Bellberg. Okay, just know that. But it says, but after an hour long of this, a high coffin of a room began to produce Mark an effect which his instructors had probably not anticipated. There it was.
I love that bit.
They created a room that was meant to draw you in and distract you and to pull your thinking here and to pull it there. Everything was kind of right, but it was just off slightly. And so you'd have to accept the things that were off. Your mind would go, this is not right. Why are there so many beetles at the Last Supper? Why are there so many? It's like some weird things. And your mind would get caught up in this and drawn away into this. And it would suddenly become to the point where it would devolve into just sort of chaos. But something happened here that began to produce an effect on Mark, which the instructors had probably not anticipated. And that's a huge line right there. The NIC set everything up and they missed the tiny detail. They built the vent shaft on the Death Star, incorrectly. It is so there's one thing here. And so Mark, as he's looking around the room and he's seeing all this, he chooses something that they never expected him to choose. He chose the normal. He rejected the abnormal. And as he began to do that, his chest began to expand. And his chest, the atrophies for so many years, his chest begins to expand as he chooses the normal. And he begins to grow conscience. He begins to grow courage. He begins to grow truth and ability and nobility. He begins to become noble and worthy of the suffering that he's about to go through. Man with chest, yeah.
Abolition of man. He told us that in the beginning, but he really did.
Yes.
He did it.
As you see Mark's chest expanding here, and he's going, I choose the normal. And this happens. There's a story. I can't remember who it is, but there's a philosopher. It was a Russian philosopher. I need to look this up because I quote this story all the time, but I cannot remember who it was. He said, I read the Stalinist book of atheism on our state religion, and I read it and I found Christ. And the more I read it, the more real Christ became. He said, because I knew if there was a God, he would be the opposite of what they said he was in this book.
Oh, yeah, I've read this. What is this? I've read this too.
And I was like, you can't hide it. The higher the echoes of the tune, you can't. You can cover it for a while, as Solzhenitsyn says. In the fog of lies, you can hide, you can do violence, but once the fog begins to clear, all you're left with is the violence. And you see it becomes clear. The fog can't last forever. And so when it begins to clear, you're like, no, I choose normal. And Mark does that. But it's the enemy never expects it.
What's interesting to me is the difference between Lewis's optimism here and then, like I said, coming into this one, paralleling this with 1984 and seeing the pessimism and tragedy in that where the organization does, they think that they have the loophole, and the organization has closed every possible loophole and says, everybody thinks that they can find loopholes. We've closed them all. And it's just like it leaves you with like almost this just dystopian, like, just give up.
Yeah.
This is happening.
But there's a story in the Bible that I think that 1984 would be incorrect because, again, I've already mentioned that the enemy's thinking is constipated and it's limited. Mm-hmm. If the princes of this world had known who he was, they would not have crucified the Lord Jesus. They thought they had him. They're like, gotcha. The White Witch. I'm going to kill Aslan.
It's a wrinkle in time, too.
A wrinkle in time. I've got you.
The one thing I didn't think about is like what they used to
Yes. But see, the enemy can never think of love being the answer. Remember what Harry says to Voldemort.
He doesn't have it.
You don't have it. It's not your quality. And also in the last battle, God says, or Aslan says that Tash and I don't have the same qualities. It's impossible for him to have those qualities. Yeah, you can't worship him. If you have love, that's not his quality. He can't even accept it. So he can't aim at that. He can't prepare for that. He can't prepare for you to give love or to be selfless because he doesn't know how to prepare for that because he doesn't have that ability. And so he always misses it, and they always miss the mark. There's always a hobbit, or there's always a golem running around when Gandalf says he may be yet of some use for us. And you go, oh. It was his selfishness that brought the destruction of Mordor. It was God used that to bring, in that story. And it's so. That's why I think literature is so good because it shows you, it articulates for us. This is reality, and we can put that and go, oh, I've seen this before. I know this. Yeah, I've seen this and this here. I've seen this here. I've seen this here. And we pull those threads together, and suddenly we can pull from the mythology and bring it into our real life, and then go, well, let's see if it scans in the Bible. Oh, if the princes of this world had known, they would not have crucified. Oh, they can never know. Because guess what? The Bible also says that Jesus was crucified from what? The foundations. They didn't know that from there. So when it happened, they were like, yeah, we're going to kill him. Jesus was like, oh, I've already been lamb was slain before the foundations of the world. Before anything was even put together, I already knew this. But you didn't. So the enemy never knows the ultimate plan because he's limited. The macrobes didn't know the ultimate plan. So they created this scenario. They tried to tie up the loopholes, and it failed. Because the higher language and the noble language prevailed.
I keep going back to thinking what's about to happen.
Oh.
What's about to happen? I mean, it's gross, right? I mean, it's not gross. It's what happens about it's wild. You're gonna enjoy it, but it is like the ultimate crazy chaos destruction you'll ever read about. It's crazy.
And it's all because of babble and language and misunderstanding language. It's like,
So nuts why he pulls that in.
Don't tell.
They talk about Babel in the beginning.
Yeah, they talk about Babel.
So,
Yeah, the
you know,
whole.
kind of like that's going to be a theme.
This is the whole thing of Babel. Yeah, it's all about that. Now, because I know Caitlin and I, we love the inner circle so much. Mm-hmm. And do you have something that you?
Yeah, it's not really. It's on a different. It's
okay.
From the book, but it's different. So we can.
All right. So let me hit this. Mark's whole existence is getting to the inner circle. He wants membership, and if you haven't read it, go read the inner circle essay, membership essay, and you will see that this is the articulation. This is the articulation of what would someone look like who is going after the inner circle membership. It's Mark Studdick. His whole life is, I want to get in there. I want to be in the inner circle.
Where is this written?
Huh?
Where is this? Lewis wrote something called the Inner Circle.
Yeah, Weight of Glory. It's in
Oh, it's in the Weight of Glory. It's not that long.
It's a short essay.
10, 20 pages.
Yeah.
But it's so good. It's literally just about the further if you try to get into the inner circle, there's always another one, and it backfires.
And he says you will call that inner circle so and so in their gang if you're on the outside of it. And if you notice, he actually says when he was at the college, he would listen to Curry and his gang whisper in the corner, and I was
Maybe
like,
that was a little nod.
that was a total, because listen at the end here. Mark actually finds an inner circle, and it's not St. Anne's where he finds the inner circle.
Oh yeah, he would have written Weight of Glory during World War II.
Yes. And gradually Mark fell into line. The man's breath, indeed his body, were malodorous, and his methods of eating were gross. But that sort of continual picnic which the two shared carried Mark back into the realm of childhood, which we all have enjoyed before the niceties began. Each understood perhaps an eighth part of what the other said. This is the tramp. When he's in the room, he's watching the tramp. He's babysat the tramp. But
She's not there yet.
But a kind of intimacy grew between them. Mark never noticed until years later that where there was no room for vanity, no more power or security other than children playing in a giant's kitchen, he had unawares become a member of a circle, a secret and strongly fenced against outsiders as any that he had ever dreamed of.
I love that bit.
Wow.
So he found the inner circle in a place where there was no room for vanity, or power or more power. Just children playing in a giant's kitchen.
It wasn't about your degree,
Wasn't
what
it?
you
Yeah.
studied, or what your fellowship was, or who you
Or what
tutored,
the
or
circle can
anything,
do for you, or anything like that.
or the money. Whether it was 1,500 pounds or 600.
All right. You wanna jump in on yours, Caitlin?
Sure. Yeah, it's crazy how he just pulls so many things from all of his nonfiction into his fiction. I'm always amazed. That's why I am really glad I read a lot of his nonfiction first, because when you read his fiction, you really just see all these things being pulled together that he talks about later. And I just looked up when he wrote this versus, because the thing I'm going to talk about is the Four Loves. It's when it's in the Four Loves. But I looked at when he wrote it, and I'm like, man, he's been pondering on this for 15 years, because he wrote this 15 years before he wrote the Four Loves. But this is 100% almost verbatim what he writes in the Four Loves. So I'm like, he must have been pondering on this for a while. But basically, it's on chapter, I think I typed it out. I think it's at the end of chapter 7 or something, or maybe the beginning of chapter 8. But basically, he's talking, it's whenever Ransom, it's that conversation with Ransom and Jane. And she's like being weird about Mark. And she doesn't really know how to explain her relationship with Mark without feeling embarrassed or feeling like, you know, she wants to be her own person, she wants to do her own thing, but also, and she gets really offended that Ransom kind of hints that maybe you should go talk to Mark first before you come here. And she's so upset. And she said something about being equality. She's like, I thought marriage is about equality. And he said, no, that's the opposite of what it is, actually. And so when he goes down that road, he talks about the difference between friendship and companionship, like, you know, marriage. I thought this was so good. I just wrote here, talking about how companions suffer through these together, not suffer one another. And so he was talking about how, like, companions, like a married couple, will suffer one another. And friendship, and if you're friends with someone, you suffer something together with that person. And so he said, do you not know how bashful friendship is? Friends, comrades, do not look at each other. Friendship would be ashamed. And so that's almost an exact quote from the Four Loves. And I looked it up, kind of like what he was talking about. I just thought it was so interesting, and something I've never thought about with friendship. He said, this is in the Four Loves, it says, those who cannot conceive friendship as a substantive love, but only as a disguise or elaboration of eros, betray the fact that they have never had a friend. The rest of us know that though we can have erotic love and friendship for the same person, yet in some ways nothing is less like a friendship than a love affair. Lovers are always talking to one another about their love. Friends hardly ever talk about their friendship. Lovers are normally face to face, absorbed in each other. Friends, side by side, absorbed in some other common interest. So I just thought it was interesting. Like it's kind of relevant to what we're talking about. But I thought it was so fascinating that he used that in a conversation of what equality and what real love is. And it's like there's no other relationship you can have on this earth that the thing you're suffering is that person. It's like in marriage, your suffering sometimes is that other person. And that's like what's making you feel so like she feels right now.
It's interesting. Talks about 4 James.
What did you say?
Talks about 4 James.
Where? Or read it.
Right in that area where she's...
After she left St. Anne and she's on the train home.
The first
Yeah.
Jane, the second Jane, and the fourth Jane.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. Yeah, about how she felt, like her different way she was feeling after that conversation. How this Jane's telling her this.
True beauty, true identity. I wrote down on the side, true beauty, true identity, true love, what she's understanding now in the fourth version of herself.
Yeah.
I thought it was
It's
so...
a state of joy. The fourth Jane is
Yeah.
the state
Her
of joy.
beauty belongs to the
being truly
director.
herself.
Yeah. And just like learning the equality, it was such a twist on it because we talk about equality so much. He was like, that's the most basic, that's an earthly thing. That's not a heavenly thing. He's like, we're the most opposite of equal in our souls. And I thought that was so interesting. Like, he always flips things on their heads and says, because you think, like I said, he talks about the Four Loves a lot about friendship and how friends aren't needed, but yet it's one of the greatest things you can have because there's no other relationship where you can suffer through something with someone. And I thought about like the hiding place and like the people she met there, and she suffered through, and that's the only reason she could manage to go through what she did is with those people. But in relationship and in marriage, the thing you're suffering is other human, and so it's just so much more difficult. And he was basically saying the sacrifice it takes for this, like it's obedience. It's not really out of choice. It's just out of obedience that you do this. And I thought that was so just beyond us even now, like what love is and the obedience it takes to like really love someone. Like in the fact he says here, like looking them in the face, because friends don't look each other in the face like that, Well, that was just cool.
Well, Lewis, he turns it on his head, but it's never flippantly. It seems flippant how he flips that. But I was talking to Walter one time, and he said, when Lewis wrote The Four Loves, he didn't sit down and go, what do I know about love? Let me just write my perspective on love. He went back to all the literature he could, all of the literature mentioning love, the church fathers, medieval writings and modern writings. He went through everything he could find, and these were the themes that he could master and articulate, and he brought them to us. So when he brings this, it's not like just going. So sometimes, like when Wither brings a rhetorical line up, if you know any logic, you knock it around. It's really hard when Lewis brings something up, and I know people will dismiss him. Like the trilemma. God is either a liar, Lord, or lunatic, right? And people are like, they'll dismiss it. It's really hard to dismiss that because it is grounded in a knowledge base that is through the entire history of our knowledge bases. Basically, Lewis goes through and pulls it apart. Now, he could be wrong somewhere, but I haven't seen anybody take down the trilemma. I haven't seen anybody take down if the universe has no meaning, I should have never come to know it had no meaning. Like a creature being born without eyes, coming to know there's no such thing as light. You can say, I can dismiss that, but what's your answer? It's like you can dismiss it very quickly, but you can't come up with something better very quickly because he's been distilling this down and breaking it apart and distilling it down and breaking it apart, putting it back together and putting it back together until he gets to a point where he's fluid and he's smoothed this thing out. When he hands it to you, it's a polished pearl. He didn't just pull it out of the oyster. Like, it's polished, it's ready to go. And so
it was so cool to read that conversation because I was like, wow, I've read this in a nonfiction sense, a very analytical sense, and now he's showing the whole conversation was basically a play out of the chapter called Friendship and the Four Loves. So I was like, wow, he's just like, if you go back, I want to go back and read it tonight, just read that one chapter on friendship. So I was like, wow, he really just does the exact, what you're talking about with Abolition of Man. He did that in like one little dialogue with Jane and Ransom. I don't know if he ever looked back at it.
And so it's 15 years.
15 years, yeah. I'm like, he must have just still, like you said, he had studied it so much he knew.
He didn't write the book until 15 years later.
Yeah.
Because he didn't have that mastered.
So crazy.
And then he's like, okay, I'm ready. Let's. I think I can articulate this. Yes, I think I can articulate this. I've never seen it. Very few people attack Lewis successfully. I think the only person ever really to do it where he changed something would have been Anscombe. And there are scholars who debate whether he lost that argument or not. But he did go back and change miracles after that conversation, yeah. People say, well, he wasn't an analytic philosopher. He missed a few things on the analytic philosophy side of it. But he was such a deep thinker in pulling things apart that he rarely got caught making a flippant statement. He also covered himself because he would say, I'm not a theologian, so...
He gets a pass.
I'm not a theologian, but I think this sounds like it could have something to it. And so... So you say it's difficult to get through. Anybody else? I mean, do you feel it was difficult, or Nina felt like it read like a thriller? So
my verdict's still out.
Verdict's still out.
Why is yours so big?
Because it's all three together.
Okay. Yeah, I think.
I've had a million children.
I thought the one.
But I haven't enjoyed it.
The one argument, or not even argument, the one thing that I didn't like, which I'm sure he has the reason why he did it, but there's so many characters. I was like, I can't keep up. I can't keep up with who's who. And
it's like you need the character list.
I need the character list. I need to picture their face or
Curry,
like
Busby,
the description.
Wither, Frost.
I couldn't keep up with all their
and then it's hard to find them again, to go back and wait, where did I...
Because some of them just pop in and out.
Yeah, and I'm like,
the Blizzard.
And like, you kind of get the gist, like you said, he does a good job of at least putting the way their names are written. Like, you know whose side they're on, like Wither, Frost. Like, you get it. But I'm like, I still wish I knew. I don't remember exactly who this guy is, and it bothers me. You know, when I'm reading through.
I feel like I finally got mostly a hold of all of them.
If I read it twice or 3 times, I think I'd be fine. It's just the first time through, I'm like...
Isn't it interesting? The first story only has like 5 characters in it. The second
one has 2. 3.
has like 3 characters in it until you get to the king at the end.
25.
And this one has a ton of people. It's a completely different story.
Lord of the Rings has 8 trillion.
Yeah, I think that's why. Seriously, Lord of the Rings was hard for me too, because it's like I can't keep up, and
and those names are just...
Yeah, I'm like, I can't pronounce these. That's my own
Try and
problem.
remember all the dwarves.
dwarves. I remember having a conversation with my cousin. It was right after my sophomore year in high school. I flew first time I ever flew. I flew to Chicago for a cousin's wedding, and a bunch of us were all sitting at McDonald's eating for lunch. And the younger brother of my cousin was getting married. Another cousin. He and I got one of those little tables that was just a two. You know how at McDonald's they have four forks, and then he and I were at the two table, and we got to talk about Lord of the Rings. And remember, this was 40-some years ago. Sitting there with him trying to name all the dwarves. And he could do it.
What?
He could name all the dwarves there in Lord of the Rings.
How many times has he done it?
Well,
I don't know.
Some people have memories like that,
40
though.
years ago, he was a big Tolkien geek back then. You know.
okay.
And that's just the sort of guy he is. He likes minutia.
Are we going to?
I just want to. Can I bring up one more part?
Oh yeah.
Yes. Please do.
I'm looking at something too.
And this is not anything philosophical or theological. This is the part where Anne gets arrested by Hardcastle.
Mm.
I'm like talking to Wes. I'm like, what did this woman do to her? I mean, like, she sounds, outside of just his description of her, just like one of the most appalling women who's ever walked the planet.
Hardcastle?
Yes. Like, it sounds like she sexually assaults this woman.
Well, so there's another part in there where he says she tells somebody to go get the girl down in the cell ready. She could spend about an hour with her.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And you go, oh, okay.
She rips her clothes off and stuff. Like,
Burns her with cigarettes and
I'm like, what? Lewis,
how
what
could you?
are you writing?
now sometimes the characters write themselves when you're writing too.
And it's not like that because I think it's very clear there's a part of Lewis's life that he won't talk about, which is mainly to do with Mrs. What's-Her-Face? Miss Moore, and some of the things he did when he was not a Christian.
He did prior to Miss Moore.
So there's obviously like that part of no one likes to talk about their life, that Lewis had that too, and also he's British, so definitely not. So like I'm like, is this where he writes those things? Like those moments.
So
What I love is how Hardcastle meets her end.
How she what?
How she meets her end.
Yeah, the end of Hardcastle.
They're at the banquet.
Oh,
Yeah.
don't say anything.
No, I won't say anymore, but it's very just.
Justice is served.
Yes.
There's a lot of justice.
It's some of my sense of justice. I don't know whether it's actually just, but
If you want to read an account of Lewis that paints him in a less than favorable light, Alistair McGrath's A Life he brings up the part Dean was talking about where Lewis, when he was a young man, was actually into sadomasochism, and he used to beat people with a cane or a whip, and so he was really into that. He was not a Christian and highly intellectual in the university lifestyle. Who knows what goes on, and so this may have been written. He wasn't an innocent. Let's put it that way. So if you're looking for Lewis to be this innocent guy who never saw anything, he wasn't. I'm always surprised when I mention C.S. Lewis and people are like, "Oh, of course the Christian." I'm like, "Oh, he was an atheist until he was 31." I don't think that. I had something where I posted a thought of mine about atheism, and I had somebody on Instagram sort of attack what I said and said, "You can only come to that conclusion from Christianity." And I was like, actually, I came to this conclusion while I was an atheist. So I don't get where that's a straw man projection and all that kind of stuff. And so it's just interesting when people hear when you talk about Lewis, they dismiss him as just some Christian guy. It's like no, he's not an innocent.
Read
He's
Surprised by Joy.
Surprised by Joy.
It's a great long but great book about how he became an agnostic and then how he became a Christian.
Or as Dorothy Sayers' dad called it, suppressed by Jack.
Suppressed by Jack.
He said he forgot. He left out a lot of stuff. So.
I know that's what people say. That's what they.
It's like he said, "Oh, I mean, it's not surprised by Joy, it's suppressed by Jack."
That's funny.
So.
Oh, this is the quote I was looking for, talking about the friendship and love kind of thing. He says, they would say, this is in that Hideous Strength, says, they would say, he answered, that you do not fail in obedience through lack of love, but have lost love because you never attempted obedience. thought that was just amazing. That's like literally exactly what he talked about in 4 Loves.
I mean, that is the relational model that I see. This is just me going off the cuff here, so feel free to push back. But I see this notion of children obey your parents. That's an obedience of you going, I'd rather not do that, father, mother, but out of obedience to you, I will do that. Fathers, don't provoke your children to wrath. So there's a boundary there. There's an obedience on my part that even though I'd like to, as a good friend of mine said, told their son that I've saved you from death 7 times a day, and they were from me. I saved you from myself. So
That's funny. That's actually really funny.
I've been ruminating on that.
That's really good. Please tell me you said that.
I can relate.
And
That's really funny.
and so my one of my friends' wife got him a plaque on the top of the stairs that says, "Thank you, Daddy, for not throwing me down the stairs." And so you see that, like, that's an obedience from me to know that I have the power to crush a spirit, to crush a heart, to injure, but I don't. Fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, because you want to plant good seeds, good things are going to grow. And then you get in the relational, wives submit to the husbands, wives love your wives, as the church. It's all of this obedience relational of tempering yourself and stopping yourself in respect to the other person, as you said, as the suffering of the other person. I'm going to elevate you, and I'm going to decrease in this, and and it's going to be this back and forth. It's never meant to be a tyrannical, dictatorial, I have power and authority. It is, power is always tempered.
Or in her case, equality, which means you never mesh whatsoever with
Right.
each other's lives. I think that was kind of what he was hinting at too. Like, to be able to love and obedience, you have to suffer for that person, and she's not willing to do that, and he's not willing to do that. So they're living their parallel lives. I would say not even walking alongside each other. They're
Roommates. Well, barely.
Yeah, because I'm going to be honest, I really like Jane a lot. I see a lot of me in Jane. A lot of me in Jane. I think I'll have a lot of the same struggles that Jane has had. But it's interesting to see her reaction and her humility towards Ransom giving her that. She's never had a figure give her that kind of insight. And when he does say that to her, she kind of, like he said, the 4 Janes afterwards are,
I mean, pride is the thing that brings both Mark and Jane down.
Yeah. That's where they're similar.
Well, and Ransom is a man giving her this advice.
Yeah.
But the fact is, he's a man who's been to 2 other planets that has a nobility with him. He carries an air of his. What did they say about Jesus? He spoke like no man. Like, his words had weight that we've never heard anybody speak like this before. And so when Ransom's speaking, it's hard for her to argue because the words are so heavy. And I think that point is like, it doesn't matter who's saying this, if it's a man or a woman. It's like the words are so heavy that this is truth, and I need to accept that.
I was just thinking that Lewis is really good at writing characters who you believe. Like Ransom, you believe that Jane has to submit to him. You believe that there's something about him that makes the animals obey him, that makes you believe Aslan. When we don't even meet him, you believe that he's special. And
But I think the reason why he does that, and he does it so well, and it's a great point, is he lays out Jane's best argument for herself. He allows Jane to steel man herself and go, here's the reason why I don't give over to Mark. Here are all of my reasons. And she's honest, and she lays them all out as anybody would. And then Ransom comes through and says, well, here are the reasons why you should. Which argument wins out? He allows the arguments to take place, and the best argument wins in the end. And so you trust him as an author because the best argument always wins.
That's like for the sake of perfect what you're saying when he says there are a dozen views about everything until you know the answer, then there's only one.
Oh.
It's like, that's how I think she felt. She had a million opinions about it, didn't know, and like all these things in her head, and then she heard that, and she's like, that's the truth. I can't have any more opinions because that's...
Well, I tell people this all the time. When I've actually it's funny when you start talking to people about their beliefs, because they have all these ideas of what they believe. And then you slowly begin to chip away at this. And one of the things I like to throw at people, because it really kind of jostles them a little bit. And I go, do you know in all of human history, recorded history of conscious thought that we have recorded down, we have 3 thoughts about God. There aren't an infinite number of thoughts, there are 3. Your belief system falls into one of these 3 categories. You're not this great, unique person, this snowflake that I have this new idea. No, once you begin to ask questions, your idea is going to come down to, there is no God. God is everything. There's one God. That's it. And they're like, oh, there's 3 thoughts about the existence. Necessity, chance, and design. That's it. That's the best we have. Your worldview is rooted in one of those 3. And then suddenly, your answer, your identity, your belief system, as Caitlin says, suddenly you have all these ideas on what life is, and then suddenly you realize that once you begin to work the problem correctly, there's only one answer. There's only one answer to that question. And once you begin to pull apart those things, when people throw all this stuff at you, and you can disseminate the information, you can pull threads and pull threads and pull threads. I had someone say to me, why do we limit ourselves to Jesus Christ being the answer? And I go, no, you misunderstood. We don't limit ourselves. It's because it's the best answer of all the answers. Give me all the answers. And once you pair that, once you know what you're looking for as something that is truth, he's a liar, lunatic, or he's Lord. And that's the option you have. There's no other God, there's no other being, there's no other person, there's no other philosophy that offers what Christianity offers.
It's like what you said earlier, which really was a pivot for my faith, was when we read The Last Battle, and he said it's not possible for you to come to another conclusion. So even if you are trying to worship someone else or some other idol in love and with all the qualities I have, even if you get it wrong, but you get it right, you still get to make it. I thought that whole argument, I feel like I've talked to Wes for hours and hours at this point about inclusivism. And so just hearing the way he put that was like, it's almost foolproof if you're searching for the truth. If you're searching for the truth, you're going to find it, that's just the most comfort I've ever felt.
That's my theological bent. Is that right there, that if you're searching for truth, you will find it. You may not say the 5 letters JESUS, but if you're projecting, you're penitent, you're humble, you're seeking for truth, and you're exhibiting fruits of the Spirit, to me, you found it. You may not be able to articulate it, but you found truth.
It might not be JESUS, like you said,
right.
In some indigenous community in Africa, but they found.
But I'll posit this to you. If an intellectual like Withers, or let's say Strake, okay? There's Strake in the book. We know that Strake. He says that he believes in JESUS, right?
Yeah.
Does he mean something different when he says Jesus?
Wow. Yeah, he does.
He talked about creating their own Lord God Almighty.
Yeah, he does.
Right. So when he says Jesus, it doesn't mean the same as when somebody else says universe.
Yeah.
When they say universe, they mean Jesus, but they don't have the right language to articulate it correctly.
Ooh, that set me free. When we talked about that, I was like, wow, this has really helped a lot of the questions I've had in my theological.
So when someone uses the name of Jesus to go commit atrocities, is Jesus in that atrocity? No, he's not. Not at all. Because because that's not the quality of Jesus. So
I think that's what's cool about like The Most Reluctant Convert, like even that movie and that play. I'd love to see the play too, but it takes you on that journey, and you can't people get upset or getting annoyed by Wes sharing some C.S. Lewis comment, which Lewis is coming from a person who was an atheist, like a legit atheist. And the way he came to faith in Christ wasn't through some all of a sudden the Holy Spirit came down. And, I mean, I had some Holy Spirit moments, the walk on Addison's Walk with Tolkien and Dyson, but it came through learning and understanding and conversations with other Christians who were also intellectuals and of course all of his own study. And I'm like, is there for all these people who tout so much study, I'm like, this one person's story is pretty powerful when you read through it. And there's so many with that kind of story. It's not just Lewis, it's you, and there's
Seeking Allah, finding Jesus.
Seeking Allah, finding Jesus. I mean,
that's an incredible book.
Case for Christ. He went out to prove this
case for Christ.
Jesus. Yeah.
And I'm like, if you are honest, like this girl that commented on Wes's post and said you can only see it from a Christian perspective. I'm like, I don't think she understands her own atheism then, because if she understood her own atheism, she wouldn't be afraid to ask this question.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's a group of atheists who are there because they're intellectual atheists, of sort of, for lack of better language. And then there's the group call themselves atheists because they're so sad about life, they don't want to acknowledge there's a God, because if there's a God, then he hates them.
And I've been there.
And so, and I'm like, and that's your emotional, atheist, in my opinion.
So maybe there's a difference between an emotional atheist and an intellectual atheist.
I set out to kill God in my 20s. That was my whole goal, was to burn God root and branch out of everything. And he let me try. And then he backed me into a corner to where I had no other answers but him.
But now he's having a conversation with another friend of ours from that same group. Wow.
Yeah.
He's like, he was a little annoyed by Wes's comments, but Wes is asking him deeper questions, and the guy doesn't have answers. And he's like, that's a good question. He's actually saying he's more intellectual side of it.
Yeah.
He's emotional. He was emotional because he didn't like what Wes said. But then when Wes kindly asked him questions, he's like, I don't have answers for that. I don't have answers for that. That's a good point.
It's the best you could ask for.
And he said, he's like, I'm enjoying this conversation.
Yeah.
So I think that's the people, I don't know, like Robbie talked about asking the questioner. I mean, you're coming down to the questioner. It's not always about the question. Sometimes it's about the pain.
I think I wrote this in my book, actually, about I had a moment, I was wrestling a lot with my faith. That's 2 years ago now, whenever I felt the Holy Spirit say, I was never afraid of your questions, you were afraid of my answers. And that was a big turning point in my faith, too. Because I was just so frustrated. And
Titus doesn't like diapers.
oh no, that's an emergency. You might need your whiskey.
Yes, take that.
I was going to say,
Take your gross whiskey with you.
this might be the night for it.
No diapers.
But yeah, I just thought that was a big turning point.
Are we done with
Like,
this
man.
book, or are we going to do another week?
Yeah, what are we doing with next week? I won't be here. I can zoom in probably.
If you can zoom in, well, I don't know. We'll discuss it and we'll get back. So.
I know everyone's got it, so we got to wrap it up now.
Yeah, we have to wrap this up.
Yeah.
We've gone over a little bit. Yeah, so because we're the Christmas party. I don't know what people are doing. If we do this, if we finish this book, the Christmas party would be on the 20th, or maybe we could do it on a Sunday on the 19th, or we could figure out something.
It's difficult because everyone
everyone goes. Or we could just not do a Christmas party because if everybody's going to be
I know
gone.
it's not Christmassy, but we could have a get together after Christmas.
Yeah,
That would be ideal.
we could have a holiday party. We could
It could be a New Year party, right?
we could kick off the new year.
New Year party for the whole first month.
That's what I'm saying. If we do it in January,
We
it's
could, yeah,
a New
we,
Year party.
we could have a New Year party, and we
That'd be
can
fun.
and we won't do anything. Just have a New Year party.
We
I
can
love it.
roast chestnuts
On the open fire.
on an open fire, and you can visit the donkey.
Yes.
We'll have it out at our farm, and everybody can come out
You
and.
need to meet the baby before
I
he's not
haven't
a
even
baby
met the
anymore.
baby. Baby Cassian.
Meet the baby.
So I guess we'll finish this next week.
Okay. I'll try to zoom in. Text me. I will be in Belize, but text me and remind me. I will try.
Okay, because we're gonna want your
Oh,
input.
I'm gonna want to talk about it.
I
Yeah.
want to hear what you think about
Because-
the final
Tonight.
scenes.
I wish we could have gotten into it tonight because it would have been so.
No.
I
This
had
is
to-
what happens because I always read. You know this. I'm never behind, and when I'm behind, I'm like, leave everybody in the dark.
Well, the thing is, I think David will be. Maybe he'll be around next week,
He's really good. at
and he'll
talking
have
about
some
his books.
have some stuff. But yeah,
David has really good points on this series this trilogy.
Did
but
you record this?
always.
Always.
All right. Well, that's going to be it for tonight. This is also, if you guys want to promote the podcast,
Yes.
We're getting about 50 to 60 downloads a month.
That's so
on it.
crazy that 50, 60 people who aren't here are just listening.
Yes.
It's amazing.
So between this and the Unabashed Resolute podcast, we're about at 100 downloads a month. I'd like to get that to increase, but we've never promoted this podcast ever. So it's kind of crazy that it gets so many downloads.
Yeah.
That people are just hashtags. I guess are with SEO. I guess is working a little bit.
I was gonna say keep doing those.
Trying, but
I'll keep posting.
anyway, next week will be the last installment of this Christmas break. We'll meet back on New Year's, and then I think we're going to start with Madeline Ingalls Walking on Water, and it'll be so. The spring semester is a lot of theology. So we deal with more theological stuff. And then the summertime is more cultural stuff that we try to deal with. And then
jump into fiction.
And then we go in the fall is literature.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how we do it. But all right, that's all for tonight. Thank you guys so much for coming. Further up.
Further in.